Well, greetings, everybody, and welcome to Duerrisms, the podcast. I know we're a week behind when we said we would be here with you, but this actually works out for the better. And I am truly thankful to this man this week because he's saving me one of my least favorite writing jobs of the entire year. I love to do mid-season awards, Matt Schuckman.
Yes, you do.
I do, but it's just always very echo chamber without somebody to give you some pushback.
Well, and you tend to elaborate a lot in those, so this allows you to elaborate out loud.
And bounce it off of you and kind of give us a format of where we're going. Again, the great Matt Schuckman, sports editor at Muddy River Sports, who does such a phenomenal job for those folks. But today he is ours, and we're going to pick his brain about all things high school football awards to this point.
Okay.
We're going to talk about our coaches of the year at this point, our breakout player, the guy that came from off radar that most surprised us to this point.
I like that.
We'll talk about our offensive and defensive MVPs in each state. For you, that will be Missouri. For me, that will be Missouri, Iowa, if that's applicable, because we do have a little bit different areas.
Correct.
But that's how we're going to address it today, and then we're going to come back and talk about some other things going on in tri-state local sports. But as we always do, we're going to start this off cinematically this time. I think you and I...
The pop culture segment.
Oh, the pop culture fun. You and I kind of got started on this almost by accident. A couple of weeks ago, somebody raised the topic of, do you have a favorite movie monologue? And everybody does when you start thinking about it.
Correct.
And you and I yesterday were engaging, and I was totally wrong in my guesses what I thought your favorite monologues would be, because I thought they would all be baseball related.
And there are some extremely good baseball movie monologues.
Okay.
And obviously the James Earl Jones one in Field of Dreams, the Kevin Costner one in Bull Durham are probably two of the best. And
which I thought would have been 1-2 for this guy right here.
And they would probably, if I had to make a list, would probably be 4 or 5.
Oh, wow. So this is going to get real interesting real fast. Before we get into our top 3 each, and we'll go in ascending order from 3 to 1.
All right.
Any honorable mentions for you, Matt Schuckman, that were just kind of off the list for you?
The two I just mentioned would be it. Those were the two that I sat there and went, do I put them in my top 3? Just because we are sports guys. This is a sports podcast. Do I make sure I put sports in there? And then I went, no. These are my 3 favorite ones, and so those would be my 2 honorable mentions.
I'll go with 2 honorable mentions. One, the great Jack Nicholson telling us that, we need him on that wall and telling Tom Cruise that
a very good one.
We can't handle the truth in A Few Good Men. And the second one, because this is a family podcast, I'm not going to say too terribly much about, but it is the great Christopher Walken telling young Butch the boxer how he got his dad's watch home from Vietnam in Pulp Fiction.
Very nice.
Yeah, which, again, no more said on that front. Matt Schuckman, number 3 for you.
Maybe my favorite movie of all time.
Okay.
Tombstone.
Oh.
With a lot of fantastic one-liners or great dialogue. But there's one scene in there that, and it's at the end. And it's when Doc Holliday is in the sanatorium and he's dying, and he sits there, and the end of it, he says, live for me.
Yeah.
Live your life, Wyatt. And I don't remember the exact verbiage right now, but that scene and what he says, at the end, and he says, if you ever were my friend, leave now.
Is there a movie you think combined that you or I have seen more together in different times than Tombstone?
No, there can't be.
And it's almost like you can do almost every line in that.
I'm your Huckleberry.
And that was like, as good as Val Kilmer has been in a million other things, that was a transcendent performance as Doc Holliday.
Oh, incredible.
Makes the movie. That's a really good call. I'm going to go with a movie that I don't think is a particularly great movie, but it's one of the best characters ever established in a movie, and it's by probably our greatest living actor, Daniel Day-Lewis.
Okay.
And it would be the scene at the end of There Will Be Blood when he's explaining to Paul Dano, who was also a phenomenal actor in his own right, but much younger Paul Dano at the time, about the concept of drainage in the oil business. And the very famous line, "I'll drink your milkshake. If you have a straw and I have a straw and my straw goes across the room, I drink your milkshake." I drink it all. And then he kills him with a bowling pin. Spoiler alert. It's just Daniel Day-Lewis at his hammiest best. And it's like 13 full minutes of him doing this before he finally whacks Paul Dano, who's been trying to get revenge on the entire movie, with a bowling pin. So if you want to set up for a movie, I don't know that I could do it any better than that.
That's pretty good. I like that.
Number 2 for you, my friend.
Okay. As much as I love Nicolas Cage as an actor, Robin Williams is probably my favorite actor.
I could see that.
And you could go the comedy route.
Sure.
You could go the serious route with him, and I'm all over the board with whatever he did throughout his career. But Dead Poets Society is up there close to Tombstone with me. And the first time he comes into the classroom, he takes them out in the hall, and they're looking at the pictures in the trophy case of the old groups, and he tells them to lean in and hear the voices of the past. And then he leans in, and he's kind of whispering. And he's trying to make them think that the voices are talking to him, and he says, "Carpe diem, seize the day, boys, make your lives extraordinary." And it just that whole set, because it's just him talking throughout that whole thing, and it's the whole part of gather ye rosebuds while ye may, and the whole bit, and just the way that monologue ends, and that's when we get introduced to "Oh Captain, My Captain," and
Great
again,
movie.
I could watch that movie over and over and over again.
Robin Williams could make that list for a number of, because I think the stuff he did in Good Will Hunting, especially when he's talking to Damon for the very first time about, if you tell me who you are, I'm in.
Yeah.
I mean, the man was an incredible actor.
And the very first time he goes on the air in Saigon in Good Morning Vietnam.
Oh, I forgot all about how good that was.
That whole, it's like 3 minutes. And it's one joke after another, and he's all over the place like typical Robin Williams, but it's just, it was incredible.
Puts you right there in that moment.
Yeah.
It brings you right into that movie.
Yeah.
My number 2 is a movie that's probably better known for keeping people out of the water for many, many years in the 70s. And I think, Jaws is a great movie, obviously,
no question.
but it doesn't resonate the same way without Robert Shaw talking about the incident on the USS Indianapolis, delivering the bomb, the Hiroshima bomb. And this tells you how bad a father I am. Carson Dewar could do that monologue from age 11 on.
Oh, wow.
And there's just so much good to it. And the line that we always did was, "No distress signal was sent." Got eyes like a doll, black. They roll back in the eyes. Robert Shaw is incredible. Plus, he sings "My Lady of Spain" in that. And apparently, I found out many years later that he did that song like when he was much younger in a different movie. And it's like I didn't realize that it was kind of a callback. But it's so harrowing, him talking about the sharks just plucking and hunting men in the water.
Think of all the shark movies that have come out, especially in recent time. The Meg and the Meg 2, I think, out there.
Sure.
Whatever. Jaws is still the epitome.
It is. And does that movie work without Quint in the boat? And great Richard Dreyfuss in that movie as well. But does it work as well without him giving Quint some character why he hates the sharks so terribly much? So that would be number 2 for me, and I think that's an all-timer.
My number 1, and I know it surprised you when I brought it up.
It did. I was shocked.
Most people think of Al Pacino, they think of Scarface.
Right. The Godfather.
The Godfather and everything. Scent of a Woman. When they're in the school board meeting and Charlie's about to get expelled, and Lieutenant Colonel Frank Slade is there to defend Charlie, and he beats on the gavel the headmaster and tells him he's out of order, and I'm not out of order.
You're out of order.
And just goes on that, and just I watched it this morning, and it's about a minute and a half of just beauty from him, and the gravel in his voice, and how loud he gets in that moment, and I could just sit there and listen to him do that over and over again.
It's a lot like that Daniel Day-Lewis moment that I'm talking about, because there's a great actor hemming it up to the absolute zenith of Al Pacino hamdom.
Oh, no question.
So that is phenomenal. My number 1, and I am not a huge Alec Baldwin fan, except for the 8 minutes he's in Glengarry Glen Ross, which, I can't tell you the number of pop culture references. A, Matt Schuckman. B, C, closing. Coffee is for closers. Sitting in that room, and he was a young actor when he came in. And you've got Jack Lemmon in that room. You had Pacino, but not in that room in that scene.
Right.
Alan Arkin, young Kevin Spacey, and he is on a mission of mercy for Mitch and Murray to come in and get a bunch of real estate salesmen trying to scam people out of their money to do better. And think of the lines in that movie. Coffee is for closers. And the chance that, this is my watch. This costs more than your car, and at first prize, we're running a sales pitch. First prize is a new Cadillac. Second prize, set of steak knives. Third prize, you're fired. And he uses the F-bomb in that movie better than anyone in the history of cinema outside of maybe Samuel L. Jackson.
I was going to say, don't be dissing Samuel L.
I'm not going to, but just outside of maybe him and Brian Cox in Succession. Other than that, he is an artist with the F-bomb in that movie, and it is my favorite. I watch it at least 3 times a year. 9 minutes I can't get enough of.
And now you got my head spinning on Samuel L. Jackson's monologues.
They're pretty good, too.
Good.
There are some pretty good ones out there as well. So thank you for indulging us that.
Yes.
Let us talk some football.
Let's go.
Let's start with your coach of the year to this point. We are 4 weeks into the season. This is Wednesday. So this is exactly the midpoint of the regular season that you and I are sitting here and talking. Who to your mind, and I think we're going to do this state to state, is that correct?
That's fine.
Who to your mind has done the best job in the state of Missouri to this point coaching up their football team?
To me, it's South Shelby's Adam Gunnerman.
Okay.
You take a team that lost a quarterback that threw for 5,000 career yards and 50 career touchdowns, and you don't miss a beat. You find pieces to fit in there. Chase Mulring's done really well over there. Kendall Hammond, Cameron Wiseman. We could go up and down the list. But that team has found a way to use its strengths. And he's been building this since he got to South Shelby. This isn't just an overnight thing. They had a statement game last week against Monroe City.
I would say it was, dare I say it was transformational.
Yeah.
Because they went from being a team that took it from Monroe City to taking it to Monroe City.
And they took it to Monroe City.
53-point deficit and margin of victory.
Yeah. They put a running clock on Monroe City.
That doesn't happen. The number 4 team in the state at the time, that doesn't happen to David Kirby teams ever. And certainly doesn't happen to Brock Idris defenses.
No, gosh, no.
I don't know that I've seen a better offensive line performance in a long time than what South Shelby did to Monroe.
They earned those ribeyes.
They certainly, and ribeyes are tasty, as you and I can both attest. So I'm not going to disagree with you. To this point, he would be my choice in Missouri as well. I think there are some other very worthy candidates.
I think there are too.
Ethan Allen, Mark St. Clair, obviously Jeff Geschwinder getting his team back together after Elias.
Correct. And I know they're 1-3, but the job Dalton Hill's doing there and bringing that program back around, again, they've won 1 game. But the transformation from week 1 to week 4 has been impressive. And for everything that went on in the last year in Palmyra, for him to bring that team together, to get them to buy in, to get them, as he put it, do simple better. They're making incredible strides. So don't leave him off the radar.
I would also argue that based on the fact that maybe they're just 2-2 at this point, but Caleb Arnsman came into the season saying, we got to play better defense.
Yes.
Look at what they've done the last 2 weeks against Clark County, who they nearly shut out for the entirety of the first half.
Right.
And for 3 quarters, they were the better team than Monroe City.
Correct.
That defense is good. And,
it is.
And he has put his energy and devotion, and you can see it working. And they're tough to sled against. So I think he's another under-radar list name for you in Missouri. Flip side of that in Illinois, is there somebody that really stands out, or is it the obvious?
The obvious is Rick Little.
Right.
There's one, I think, right now for me. If season ended today, who's my coach of the year? It's Tanner Horrell at Macomb.
They dealt with a lot this week.
They not only dealt with a lot this week. Think of how much they lost from last year's team. They put in a new quarterback. They had their two studs that were coming back moved away.
Sure.
They've had to rebuild that team. They're sitting there 3-1, and then on top of that, they lose a freshman player in a tragic accident, and they held it together.
Yeah.
That says a lot.
I don't disagree with you. I'm going to champion somebody else because I think when we get down to the end of the season, we're going to have the obvious candidates to talk about just the way this football season is going.
At the end of it's going to be Rick Little and Brad Dixon on the Illinois side at the end of the year.
I don't think there's any question.
And not picking them right now is no knock on them.
No.
We're
there.
discussing. Yeah. This is discussion.
I'll throw out the other undefeated team in Illinois right now that I don't think anybody saw coming, and that's John McCormick's West Prairie Southeastern squad, which, by the way, 8-man football. A lot of it looks like Madden on rookie mode. You're putting 80 points on the board.
Yes.
They're winning with a defense that's holding people to 7.7 points per game right now.
That's pretty impressive in 8-man.
Yeah, and they're doing it with senior guys who are athletic up front. And, they're only 3 years into this 8-man experience.
Right.
And we know John McCormick was a great coach at Bushnell all those years because his teams always won. And, often we're in the way of some of those Carthage teams and whatever during the course of that. But,
Correct.
man, just the job that they've done and kind of putting that together and being somebody that we all now have to pay attention to just because of the connection to Southeastern, the fact that 8-man football is starting to grow a little bit in Illinois.
Yeah.
So I would just throw out, in defense of that, something that I think is a really unique entity that maybe we're not talking about in the hail of maybe a Rick Little or, a Brad Dixon run at the end of this year.
Makes sense.
Your breakout guy.
I've seen a lot of Quincy High School so far.
Okay.
I've paid attention to, I've seen Macomb, I've seen Illini West.
Okay.
The guys who you kind of expect to play well have played well on all those fronts. Notre Dame, same thing. There's never really been.
There aren't a lot of surprises.
Rico Clay is the one surprise that I think, because when you talked about Quincy High School coming in the year, you talked about all their weapons offensively. When you talk defense, you talk Ty Douglas, you talked Tykel Hammers in the defensive backfield, Jack Medemeyer, cornerback, the guys up front who I've written about.
Right.
There wasn't much talk about what Rico Clay would do. Well, he's been a game changer at cornerback. Now, I think any coach in the area would die for a 6'2", super long arms, athletic cornerback. Rick Little has that, and Rico's just getting better. He's getting more confident. When you make plays, you gain confidence, and he's making plays.
I'm going to go to the other side of the river, and we talked quarterbacks, and you talked about Chase Mollering, who I don't think anybody saw coming to this degree this quickly. There's another quarterback who's been instrumental, who was not a quarterback at the start of the season, who you will find wearing number 42 on the field, which still blows my mind, but it's a family thing.
Yeah.
So Ryland Compton has been really good since taking over the quarterback spot against Centralia. You saw what they nearly did to Centralia that first half, and you saw they got their first win last week, and they've taken away his best wide receiver. Drew Copenhaver made a spectacular catch, tore up his knee against Centralia, doing that same thing. Imagine what they'd be with him around. I think Ryland, for a guy who has come from literally nowhere, who was not listed on the quarterback depth chart, that none of us talked about preseason, has been a really fun surprise.
I would agree with that. The other thing that jumps out at me about when you brought up Drew Copenhaver, I don't know how much you see of his stuff on social media, but kids get injured, and some kids struggle with it, understandably so, of the fact that they don't get to play and what they've got to go through. And
I'd be apoplectic.
And some kids handle it pretty well. Looking at Drew Copenhaver's social media stuff, and I'm hoping to get the chance to talk to him soon about this. It's like, okay, I'm injured. Let's go. Let's get the surgery. The mature way he's handled it, it's almost been like a bright light of, yep, I'm going to be back. And just he's embraced it, and it was like, wow, it impressed me. It impressed me to a high level. Just the way he's gone about it. I know kids are different on social media these days. When even 5 years ago, you didn't know much about kids' injuries. But here they are putting stuff out there. Here's what I did. Wyatt Mueller put on social media about his broken fibula,
which is a heartbreaker as well.
Yeah. But I just the way I read those social media posts from Drew Copenhaver just made me go, I want to talk to him. I think this would be great.
He has one speed, and that's the speed he's taken in recovery as well, which you got to admire. Can I ask you something on a surprise player?
Yeah.
Because you have a better sense of Quincy Notre Dame than anybody. Gavin Dolman surprised you at all, or did you see this coming a mile away?
I don't know. I can't say I saw it coming a mile away.
Okay.
But if you knew the kid and saw the speed and athleticism and his dad, you kind of had the feeling he was going to be a good football player.
I didn't know how to put that into context, and I figured you were the right guy to ask.
I mean, you got to remember, here's a kid as a freshman, played on that baseball team that took third in state, mostly as a pinch runner, maybe as a corner outfielder. He's got incredible speed, reads the ball really well, and I think that translates to reading passes, as a cornerback. And again, he's a game changer because of that speed.
Braden Holthouse, you got a chance to see him in person against Illini West. I saw him twice in person against West Hancock.
And I watched the video of the West Hancock game.
I don't think he qualifies as a breakout guy, but because I think we knew he was athletic.
Yes.
The degree to which his future is opening up and what his ceiling is that a surprise?
I think a little bit. I think we knew he would be a good quarterback for Macomb.
Okay.
But I think we're starting to see the pieces of why You remember, he's a junior.
Yeah.
So why next year he might be the second best quarterback in our area.
Behind Braden Little.
Behind Braden Little.
Yeah. The only thing I don't like about Braden is, and I know he is a spectacular defensive player, at some point it's not cowardly to duck out of the sidelines. I think he likes to initiate contact a little too much, and at some point I think he needs to learn that the importance of what he means to Macomb means more than lowering the shoulder on dudes.
And he'll figure that out.
I hope he does. But other than that, he's been spectacular.
Yes, he has.
Let's talk defense first. You want to go there, or do you want to? Okay, let's start defense. Do you want to start on Missouri, or do you want to start on Illinois?
Let's go Missouri.
Okay, Missouri Defensive Player of the Year. To your mind at this point, so far, who has been the best defensive player in the state of Missouri?
Kendall Hammond, South Shelby linebacker. Now you can pick a couple different guys from South Shelby, but he's the thumper.
Yeah, he is.
You know, and every really good defense has a thumper in the middle. And if you know, when we talk about Illinois, we're going to talk about some thumpers. Ty Douglas from Quincy High would be one. But you got to have a thumper in the middle, a guy that makes plays sideline to sideline, guys that can run somebody down from behind. And that's not to take away anything else from any of the other South Shelby kids who are making plays defensively. But he's my thumper.
Do you feel almost guilty leaving him out of the offensive conversation at the expense of the defensive conversation?
No, not really.
Okay.
Because, I mean, as good as he's been offensively, and to take nothing away, in my mind, and he may disagree with me, and I'm going to sit down with him this week.
Good.
So, in my mind, he's a defensive player who's just really good on offense.
Okay. He
may disagree with me.
I'm going to give you a chance because you also, as part of that interview, and I know this is coming, get a chance to interview the night terror, the defensive night terror, Cameron Wiseman,
Yes.
who I need to hear your take on his charisma level after that, because that young man is a spectacular soundbite. So have fun with those interviews. I'm going to go with a guy who's going to be on the field in opposition to Kendall Hammond as my MVP to this point defensively, and that's Drew Holstead at Clark County. For what they've been able to do, for my mind, as good as South Shelby's defense has been, I still think Clark County might be the best defensive team in our area. And I also think there are a lot of guys who have a hand in. I think Connor Westerkamp has been as good as anybody in the secondary in our region to this point. I'm really anxious to see if we get some clarity on who's better this week in terms of those two defenses. But right now, Drew there's almost and I'm old school, so I'm going to throw it back. There's almost a Mike Merriweather type ability for him to not only play up against the run, but to drop back in coverage. And I think Clark County's linebackers, their back guys, you talk about a secondary. It's not just their secondary, it's their linebackers dropping back in coverage. That's a really good defense, and that's a really, really interesting matchup coming up on Friday. All right, so we've done Missouri and Missouri-Iowa. I didn't really have an Iowa guy to put in that. I think I lost a little bit of inertia with Central Lee taking a loss this last week because Chase Johnson has been very good for them, filling in for Hunter Gregory. He would be another guy I would at least consider in that conversation. Let's go to Illinois.
Okay.
Is it almost which Blue Devil or which Panther you want to pick at this point?
It is kind of, and we've had two teams kind of across the board separate themselves on the Illinois side. That doesn't mean you can't look at some other guys, because Gavin Dolman's a guy you could consider with what he's done for Notre Dame. You know, I was trying to think of somebody with Macomb. Macomb being 3-1, they beat Illini West, they beat West Hancock.
You like Jack Beal a lot.
I do like Jack Beal a lot, and I like Drew Watson a lot.
Oh, Drew Watson's spectacular.
Yes, so they've got some guys you got to keep an eye on, and we'll see how they grow and progress. But they're off to a really good start in that sense. I gravitate back to Ty Douglas.
Yeah.
I do. And again, I've not seen Central in person yet. Okay. I will this Friday night.
I have not seen Quincy High in person yet. So we're kind of in separate sides of this argument.
Will our arguments change?
Probably.
After we see them in person.
Probably.
But that's what and I know Central's playing Brown County, the rivalry game this week. And so I'm anxious to see Central this week because I haven't seen him. But I've seen Ty Douglas. I've seen Ty Douglas now for 3 years. I've seen him. He's got a motor, and he's got that sideline to sideline that I talked about with Kendall Hammond. He runs plays down. And again, Rico Clay's been the star of the QHS defense. Defensive line has been really good, but Ty Douglas, he's your thumper in the middle.
And he's also the energy. He is that guy on that team, and you'll get no argument from me. I'm going to invert that, and I think Ty Douglas is the most talented kid in our area defensively, bar none, just from that standpoint. I'm going to look at it from the Central standpoint, though. 4-0. I think that defense is what they do. And you get two guys, obviously, and Elijah Genenbacher, and you get Caden Niekamp.
Yeah.
There's a guy on that group that I don't think gets enough love, and Gabe Blewett, who is so essential to what they do at the back end as well. But I'm going to go with those two guys. And the construct of the Central defense is to funnel everything to the linebacker. So Elijah gets a lot of tackles. He deserves them. There's nobody that makes that team more special than Caden Niekamp, who is now just in his second year. I mean, it's just it's insane how good he already is.
Crazy.
And I hate to throw this out because I know I'll have the Carthage and Brown County people down my throat, but you want to talk about him in the same breath as TJ Men or Nathan Goudshaw? He's that dude, except he's a little bigger. So to my mind, he is the most special piece of a very, very special defense that's the best small school defense in our area right now. So
I look forward to seeing him Friday night in person.
I think you'll enjoy that. Offensively, I think this gets a little easier, although I think you and I have a really good talk about Missouri. So let's start on the Illinois side.
I think we're in agreement here. It's Braden Little of Quincy High School.
The only guy I can see you even having a conversation about is his tailback, Jarius Rice.
Correct.
Who's the only other guy in that conversation. Now, I guess Tykel Hammer's catching the ball if you want.
You can make that case, but I don't know if there's another guy offensively from any team in the area. And Ian Bensinger's been good at, Nick Johnson have both been good at Illini West. Wes Hancock, for being 0-4, has played well.
They have.
But again, Central's putting up numbers, but it's across the board. There's no one guy doing it all.
And they're not going to produce
you go
that
with
guy.
Nick Moore at quarterback for being the guy who funnels everything.
Who is the efficiency king, but Braden's efficiency isn't all that far off for all the more attempts he has.
Yeah, and
he's insane.
He slings it. I mean, there are times he throws the ball and I just go, wow, because he puts it in a window that nobody else can.
I asked his dad about that once, how he can be blasé about that. And he says, well, I want him to throw the spiral tighter. What are you talking about?
Well, that's a former quarterback critiquing a quarterback.
Maybe we need to bring Jim Unruh in and remind Ricky Little that perhaps he didn't throw the tight spiral that he thought he did back in the day.
He didn't let him throw it.
Well, Jim Unruh's claim to fame, yes. You'll get no argument. I think Braden Little right now is probably my leader overall for Player of the Year at this point. But a lot has to shake down. I mean, and a lot of it's going to depend on the end game. But you'll get no argument with me. I can't really even come up with a guy that I would put in that conversation as kind of an offshoot at this particular time.
No, there's just the teams that are having success. There's so much balance.
There is.
I was looking at Macomb 3-1. Who stands out on their offense?
Ian Case is a tight end,
Ian Case is a tight end. Drew Watson's been good at wide receiver. Connor Bishop's been good in the backfield.
Deion Doyle,
Doyle's got some skill. I mean, obviously, Braden Holdhouse has done some nice things. But if you're talking somebody who's elevated their team, it's Braden Little.
No argument there. Now, let's get to the Missouri side of this, because I think this is the most interesting part of the conversation.
Well, we know who the best player is on Missouri.
We know who the best athlete is, maybe in the history of the Tri-States.
Yeah.
In football, in terms of football.
Yes, and Aeneas Williams of Hannibal.
And his start has been phenomenal.
Basically for 3 games, because he didn't touch the ball last week.
No, and didn't have to.
And didn't have to. I mean, they scored 75 points on a Fulton team without Aeneas Williams with one single run.
Fulton had 40 kids.
Exactly.
It's almost like mercy at this point.
But when they need Aeneas, he's there. And again, put the ball in his hands. He's the most dynamic player out there. So with that in mind, let's set him to the side.
Okay.
Who is it then? Who's the offensive MVP in Missouri at the midseason? If we take Aeneas out of the question, Aeneas would be I think Aeneas is just on a level above everyone else. And at the end of the year, he's probably that guy. I know you're giving me that look because I know where you're going with it. And as good as he is, and the guy you're going to talk about in a minute, he's not Aeneas.
Nobody is.
There.
And
okay.
I don't think anybody ever has been.
Okay. So who's next on the list?
For me, it's Dagon Blaine Bryant.
Yeah.
And to this point, averaging better than 12 yards a carry, much like Aeneas with the Troy Buchanan game, which I think we can say was Aeneas' signature game. It was the game that, does Hannibal win? Is Hannibal back after Elias? Aeneas shouldered so much of that load in that game, and I know he has a particular dislike for Troy Buchanan over the course of the last 2 years, and it amplifies.
Yes.
God, we love Aeneas just because he doesn't hide that stuff.
Not at all.
He is 100% authentic, which you love about that kid.
Yes.
I mean, he had that signature game, but I would argue that Blaine Bryant also has that because Bowling Green beating a Lutheran team 2 years removed from winning a state title is a big, big feather in the cap of that program.
Yeah.
And, you know, you're talking about a kid who's averaging 12.9 yards per carry, who has 18 touchdowns so far, 15 on the ground, 1 passing, 190-yard, kickoff return, and 1, I think, interception return. I mean, 2 of his passes, one catch for a touchdown there. He's been insane, and there's a reason he's going Division I.
Yes,
and
no question.
I think at some point, does it become an economies of scale argument? Yeah, it probably does, and that favors Aeneas because they are going to play harder competition down the stretch if they get where they need to go. But I think there's also a postseason component of that. I mean, I kind of got let off the hook last year in the worst possible way because Aeneas wasn't there at the finish line.
Correct.
So you don't have to have the hard argument about Marcus Starks and Aeneas Williams heads up. You have that argument, you know, because it's in a vacuum with one player playing and one player who couldn't contribute.
I have it a little easier than you because Bowling Green's not in our the Muddy River sports coverage area. But then I start thinking, okay, who else within our coverage area do you talk about in that vein?
Okay.
Who is it? We mentioned Kendall Hammond earlier, and he's been really good offensively. The guy that I like and that, again, I'm anxious to talk to on the offensive side is Cameron Wiseman.
He's an interesting piece.
Yeah.
I would say Johnny Shin is an interesting piece with what he's done for Clark County the last 2 weeks.
I agree with that.
I think if you go past your viewing area a little bit to a much smaller scale, there's a really good dark horse argument, and I don't think he gets into the player of the year conversation, but Louisiana's been pretty good, and Ethan Harrison has been a huge reason why. So you can start picking and choosing some really interesting guys to talk about. Again, not on the level of Aeneas and not on the level of Blaine, but there's another tier there that gets really, really interesting. And again, I'm not ready to write off Monroe City at this particular juncture either, because if you bounce back this week and beat Centralia, that's a really big, important thing.
When does Waylon DeGrave become a bigger factor offensively?
I think after last week, we saw that needs to happen.
Yeah.
I think we saw a couple of flaws of construct. And right now, again, don't you want that now if you're David Kirby so you can fix it?
Yes. You don't want a week 9.
No. And be reeling.
Yeah.
So at least now you can build from it, and he's proven to build back as well as anybody.
But at the midseason, Aeneas is still my offensive MVP.
I am going to agree with that with the caveat that I still have Blaine Bryant in that competition. Right. And I think those two are so much further away than everybody else in the conversation right now that it's immaterial. All right, so at the midpoint, Matt Schuckman, is there a surprise football team to your mind that you say, okay, this was not what I expected, either positively or negatively, and what is your evaluation of their chances moving forward? Is there somebody that kind of, I guess for lack of a better word, dark horse?
I don't know if I'd call any of the ones that are jumping in my mind dark horses.
Okay.
I'm more impressed with Palmyra than I thought I would be 4 weeks in.
Okay.
Again, you know I'm a big fan of Dalton Huffman.
Yes.
One of the assistant coaches over there. And I think the youth factor of the coaching staff. You got guys that are 2-3 years out of college who were, physical beasts in college. Dalton Hill, Dalton Huffman. So I think that's a big factor there. And the buy-in there has been really good. So I think they're ahead of where I thought they'd be. I think West Hancock, even though 0-4, is better than any of us thought they would be, more competitive than any of us thought they might be in Coy Dorothy's first season as a head coach. They're going to end up winning some games. It's coming. And I think that transcends to down the road as well. I think we're going to see better things from them next year and beyond. Because I think Coy Dorothy's a really good coach. And those kids want to play for him. I think Macomb is another one. I didn't know how good they'd be with everything they lost. I know they were putting a program together. It wasn't just they were going to be good 1 year because they had Jack Duncan and JT Jeter and Jaden James. You just go down the list of who the Ethan Ladds and, Max Reiners. Well, all those guys are gone.
Right.
But now you just got a new group that's filling in, and they're playing really well. So, there's nobody that Highlands 2-2.
That would have been my choice as a team that I think we didn't see coming. And I
don't think we saw
defensively,
how good they would be defensively.
And that's a team I think that gets somebody that we don't expect them to get at some point this season. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think it's very fair.
Let's talk a little college football because you and I haven't really had that opportunity yet. And I know we're on the back end of what has been a not really star-studded scheduling affair for the Quincy University Hawks to this particular
And
point.
even though they've got a legit Division II program coming in this week, Northern Michigan's not good. They got beat by a D3 school last week, 34-3.
So what does this all mean in the grand scheme of things? Do these wins, are we convinced that Quincy University's headed in a better direction? Do we just simply not know based on sort of the weakness of this middle part of the schedule? What is your take, Chuck? Because you know that program better than anybody.
I think here's my take on it. We don't know how good QU can be.
Okay.
Because the level of competition hasn't been good. I mean, face it, the last 2 weeks, those teams had no business playing at D2 school.
Okay.
Okay, so with that in mind, I think the talent level's pretty good at QU.
I would agree.
I think it's on an upswing. So, how competitive are they going to be in the GLVC? That's what I want. Talent-wise, I think they've got a case to be 3 or 4 in the GLVC.
Okay.
If they put some things together, if they gain some confidence from what they've done with dismantling these lesser teams, if they learn from the mistakes they made against Shadron State, they were down 22-0 out of the gate and came back and lost by a point on a late drive by the Eagles. So again, how will they do? Not this week against Northern Michigan, but next week against Southwest Baptist. That sets the day, because then you go to Truman.
Let me put you on the spot. Drake Davis has changed some things for them, has he not?
I think so. I mean, again, it's hard to tell because when you're playing against a defense that can't tackle.
But he's also not turning the ball over.
No, and that's the biggest factor with Drake Davis compared to what's gone on in the past.
Okay.
Tion Harris could make plays, but he also made a bunch of bad plays too. Drake Davis isn't making bad plays. Might not make the right decision every time, but he's not throwing into double coverage and throwing an interception. He's not just winging it just to wing it. To me, he's more of a game manager than a big play guy, but he still has a good arm and is still making plays.
I think history, when we get to the back end of this, will reflect pretty strongly on the opener. I think that was, obviously we're not looking for moral victories because we're far past that with Quincy University. But I think we've seen that defense is pretty good.
Yeah,
Agent Zero is,
Yes.
he's a different level
He
dude.
is.
And Jackson Connell has really upped his game this year.
No question.
They're
After 6 years.
Oh, God, he's been there that long. It's hard to believe.
He's 42 years old.
He's like Jeff Lebo now, the guy that never left the program. But he's playing well.
He's playing great. And again, here's a guy who's been through injuries, who's worked to get back from injuries, who's, worked to make sure he's in that lineup. Lazarick Hill, really good in the defensive backfield. Joe Webb, a guy that transferred with Peyton Plunkett from Northwest Missouri State, is really good back there too. So again, and the big bugaboo for QU for the last dozen years has been their defensive front. They've always had linebackers. You going back to Dan Camp and Ike Onike, and then we got the whole Cody Leonard and that whole group. So linebackers have always been good. Defensive backs have always been pretty good. Defensive line has been the big bugaboo. Defensive line's better.
Okay, fair enough. Since we're on the QU tip, and I'm going to kind of exit here.
Okay.
I know you spent considerable time on Sunday night over there for the tip-off banquet.
Yes.
With Steve Hawkins and his good friend Tom Izzo.
That was fun.
Which I know you were always a Tom Izzo proponent
very
from
much
way
so.
back in the day. And I think anybody who knows basketball and loves basketball thinks Tom Izzo is good for the game.
Yes.
How good was Tom Izzo for the community of Quincy?
I think it was fantastic.
Okay.
I think anybody that was there thoroughly enjoyed the evening. Tom Izzo is so personable. For the people who got to do the meet and greet, his personality showed. It wasn't just shake a hand, sign an autograph. He joked with people. I got a photo of it, and it was in my photo gallery, and I found out the story later on. But I'm watching him interact with a family, and he reaches over and kind of shoves the kid, the son, put his hand on his head and kind of shoved him away jokingly. It was told him he was a Duke fan. Come on.
Nice.
But it was fun, and you see the mom and dad laughing, and you see, and then he's got his arm around him taking a picture after that. That's the Tom Izzo. That's why you bring a guy like him in here, who's not stuffy, he's not stale. He can sit there and talk to you. And And I thought QU did a very smart thing. And I think this was Coach Hawkins' idea. But instead of having Tom Izzo up on the stage with a microphone, telling stories, just talking, he and Hawkins sat on the stage.
I saw your pictures.
And had what Hawkins called a Q&A. It was more it was storytelling. Two old basketball coaches telling stories. It was phenomenal. If you sat and listened, and it was great. And I think that's the difference with that event. It wasn't stodgy. It wasn't stale. It was fresh. It was something new. Brad Underwood, the University of Illinois coach, has already committed to come in and do it next year.
Who also has a very unique and wonderful personality for that kind of event.
And he's a guy that has some local ties, having coached under Jim Kerwin at WIU. And so I think that thing's only going to build in the future, and we'll see who else he can get. Eventually, he's got to bring Dennis Gates in, doesn't he?
Let's hope that he gets the best of all the coaches
in
NCAA basketball to our neck of the woods.
That's
and
right.
I promise you, very, very, very dispassionate coverage from us.
Very straight down the line.
Right down the middle.
We wouldn't do anything different than we normally do.
What if he brings in Bill Self?
Not going.
Me either. Out.
Nope.
All right. Before we leave everybody here, Matt Schuckman, anything special? I know obviously the soccer coverage with Quincy High and the historic team has been awesome. Anything else you want to plug moving into the new week?
Just kind of, we're grinding on some stories. Here's the thing. Postseason starts next week.
Yeah, it's hard to believe,
wow, how did they, how? But the golf postseason. But it won't be long, and then we're into the soccer postseason, and then the volleyball postseason, and the football postseason.
And then it's Christmas.
Yeah, it's crazy. We're in the last week of September next week.
Hard to believe.
So, so look for postseason coverage from both of us. I know you'll be running around trying to get to everywhere. We are lucky that we have some golf regionals right in our own backyards.
Yeah.
Whether it's at Westview, up at Mount Sterling.
Right.
So, we got some.
We caught some breaks.
We caught some breaks. We're not catching many breaks when it comes to the volleyball or soccer, from what I understand.
We knew that going in.
Exactly.
Yeah,
we had those breaks last year.
Always a pleasure, my man. Good movie monologue conversation.
Oh, yeah.
Surprising movie monologue conversation from you. You floored me.
I told my wife before coming in that you would have some that I wasn't expecting, and you did, because you are the movie guru.
That's what I do. That's my hobby.
Yeah.
All right, guys, this was our edition of Duerrisms, the podcast. We're sorry it took a little longer than usual, but as always, our thanks to the great folks at Advanced Physical Therapy who make all this possible. 2 weeks from now, you and I will be back here.
Okay.
I think at that point, we're going to know exactly what we need to know about everything going forward into the postseason for football.
Yes, I think so too, and we'll be able to talk about some other postseason stuff coming up, because we'll be on the verge of the soccer postseason. And can Quincy Notre Dame make a run to defend its state title?
Do you realize we're probably 3 of these away from talking basketball?
It's crazy, isn't it?
It's insane. Again, thanks for your time, everybody, and we'll see you right back here in 2 weeks.